What is up, everybody? Today I'm going to show you two different ways that you can translate your Figma values like your white space and your font sizes accurately to CSS. You can't just use pixel values. I'm going to show you why. We have to typically use M and Rem units. So I'll show you a plugin in which you can do that, and also sort of like a CSS override to make it easy so that you don't have to deal with math or anything like that. All right, let's get started. Now, chances are, if you're watching this video, you probably want to be a better designer. And if that's the case, how much do you really want it? Because at DesignCourse.com, I've created a UI UX course that will help you go from designing layouts that I might rate a 4 or 5 up to 8 and beyond. But more important than that, as a better designer, this means that you can land higher paying clients and jobs. This course includes over 16 hours of video, 40 interactive UI design tests, and even mentorship where I personally take a look at your work that you submit, I review it, and many times I also revise it, providing you with great feedback to help you become a better designer. Now, for this video, I want you to use the coupon code UI2022, and that will give you 22% off at checkout. All right, so here is the extremely simple example. I didn't want to take a lot of time trying to do a full UI, because once you understand how to do this just within the context of what you see here, you'll be able to do this pretty much anywhere else. So I'm going to link the Figma community project here where you can just replicate this very simple design so you can follow along. I'm a strong advocate of actually following along rather than just watching, because it does help you build muscle memory when you do it with your hands and you see it take place in front of your screen on your own browser. So the first thing we're going to take a look at is just font size, and I'm also going to show you how to determine white space, or the amount of distance in the empty space between elements. So we have a few different areas of concern here when we're going to be working with our CSS. First, how much white space is all around from the very edge of the browser, or in this case the frame, to where the content begins? How do you determine that? All right, well, assuming these are both lined up on the same column, and they should be, they're right there. Well, all we have to do is just take one of these items, or like say this big green rectangle, and hold Alt, your Alt or Option key on Mac. And when you do this, let me just zoom up, and you hold Alt, you'll see that it shows this orange 37 right there. That means 37 pixels, because that's what Figma uses for their unit of measurement. So can we use pixels for things like margin, like CSS margin or padding, which is what you use to define white space in CSS? No. Typically, you don't want to use that. I'm going to show you why, though, in a second. So if I get back out of here, I'm going to refer back to right here. This is Visual Studio Code. I have a very simple document open with the necessary HTML markup needed to create that very simple design there. You can also see I have my browser open here as well. And this right here is not what that looks like. We're going to make the white space consistent, as well as the font size and everything else. So if we go to my main.css, and by the way, the folder structure is simple. I just have an index.html. I have a CSS folder with a main.css file inside of it. So I already do have some initial markup just to make the green square, or the rectangle rather, and our font family and all that good stuff. And so let's go ahead and define the white space around everything with 37 pixels. So if I choose our body, put margin 37 pixels. There we go. That looks like it's probably fairly accurate based on what we had going on in the Figma document. Let's also put in pixel values, just for the sake of argument, for our type. So if I go back here, this says it is 32 pixels. All right. So we're going to put in font size 32 pixels. Okay, now it really pretty much didn't change, because we're at the same, the default size is very similar to 32 pixels anyhow. So here's why you don't want to use pixels, especially for something like type. If I go ahead to my settings, let's go to our browser settings, and I go to appearance. You can see some people may have changed this not page zoom, but the font size where it says recommended to something that might be like very large. Now, if I do that, you can see how, almost all the type here has increased in size. Guess what? This is not. This is a problem because those people, they might have issues with being able to read and they want things to be larger than they are by default. When you put in pixel values, that doesn't happen. So we want to use M or rem units. I'm going to switch this back here to medium. And we'll come back to this and I'll show you how it actually will respond when we use an M or rem unit. And typically for type, you're going to use a rem or the responsive M unit. Okay, so let's go back here. I'm going to show you two ways for calculating and doing a conversion from pixels, the pixel values you find here for your white space and your font sizes, to M or rem units. All right, so the first way to do it is you can use a calculator, and there's also a plugin though that does the calculations for you. So if we go right here to plugins, and there's one called Handover. All right, so hand with two little, what do you call those things anyhow? All right, well, I'm just gonna call them greater than signs, Handover. And what it allows you to do is you can select type, for instance, and assuming your base pixel size is 16, what does that actually mean? I'm gonna show you what that means real quickly. If we go back here, by default, the HTML element has a font size of 16 pixels. All right, so you don't have to specify this because that's what browsers use by default. All right, and one M unit or one rem unit are equal to whatever this font size value is. So if you don't override it, it's going to be 16 pixels. So that's why that document, that Figma plugin actually has the base size by default 16 pixels, but you can of course increase or decrease that if you're doing an override. All right, so what we do is we could see if we select this type, it's going to tell us where is the font size right there. It's going to tell us that the 32 pixel size that we have created here in Figma right here is equal to exactly 2 M or rem units. All right, because we have 16 pixel base font size. So 16 times 2 is 32. Now, if we wanted to figure out maybe like this one, like the height of this rectangle, well, that would be 199 divided by 16 equals 12.44. And in fact, I'll show you with my calculator. 199 divided by 16 equals 12.4, and rounding up here to the second decimal place. So that's all we would have to do in order to figure out our M versus rem units. And so what we would do then for our font size, this is equal to 2 rem units. Let's go back here. Font size is now 2 rem units. Nothing much is going to look like it changes. However, if we go back to our settings and we increase this to very large, guess what? It is increased. Kind of hard to tell, but if I change this back to very small or go the opposite direction, you're going to see how much smaller it is. So now if we go back to medium, it responds unlike an absolute value like pixels. Okay, so that's the first way. So you can get all of your white space. Let's do it another time for another element. Like for instance, our body, getting that margin up there. I believe it was 32, right? So if we go back here just to confirm, no, it's 37. All right, so we use that plugin. We go to plugins, Handover, and we'll choose 37. Oh, it doesn't actually show you distances, so we'll have to do that one manually. We do 37 divided by 16. All right, that's 2.31. So what we do is put in margin 2.31, and we can put M units here. There we go. The distance here is going to be equal to 37 pixels. Now, let me show you a quicker way even. Now, if we take our HTML element here and we say font size 62.5%, it's going to make everything smaller because we're taking a font size, which is by default would be 100%. We're going to take that down to 62.5%. So it's going to make all the font sizes smaller. Now the reason you do this is because it will make your conversions from pixels to em or rem units much faster. And it's a matter of simply moving a decimal point over one place. So this basically makes the font size, when you're going from 100 to 62.5 to 10 pixels. So when we're working with tens, math becomes so much more easy. So let me show you. For instance, this body, the margin was 37 pixels. Well, all we have to do now is change this and move that decimal point. So 37.0, we're going to move that decimal point over one spot to the left, and it becomes 3.7 em units. All right, now there we go. Now if we take our font size over here, this was 32 pixels, 3.2 rem units. There we go. How about the white space between food for thought, for instance? All right, we take this element, we hold Alt, hover over there. You can't see it, it's 36. So that becomes 3.6 em units. So we put, let's do margin 0. Yeah, and then it would be 3.2. Did I say 3.2? I already forget what I said. Let's do em units here. Now, one thing that becomes a little bit tricky if you have a font size override and then you're using em units on the same element, we can just use rem for it to default back to this base font size no matter what. All right, I think I have that wrong. What was that? I have a terrible memory. It was 36. So we'll just change this to 0.6, 3.6. There we go. So now we have correct white space that's accurate based on our Figma prototype. Now we also do have one other thing. You could do this for all the other values like corner radiuses or border radiuses. All right, so it says the border radius is 10. That makes it super simple. That simply means we take our border radius of our green square and make it 1 rem unit. All right. And additionally, if you wanted to get the height, all right, it's going to tell us it is 355 by 199, and that's just a matter of 35.5 em versus 19.9 em as well. You could do that as well if you wish. Typically, you wouldn't want to do this with like a card, assuming there was a picture in here or something, or there was content. You wouldn't need to set an explicit height. But that's how you get your margin, your padding, and your font sizes handled here within Figma and translating it to HTML and CSS values. All right, everybody, let me know what you think in the comments about this technique. Do you use a different technique for handling your conversions? Let me know. As always, make sure to check out DesignCourse.com to learn UI, UX interactively. And also subscribe here, leave a comment, like, all that good stuff, and I'll see you soon. Goodbye.